All right, it's get my other laptop. Check. Are you live?
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is our first GCSD Governance and Policy Committee meeting for the school year. Um, Typically, in the past, the Governance Committee was its own separate, and the Policy Committee, I believe, was a meeting of a board of the whole of the board. This year, we reorganized this committee, and we decided to consolidate both the Governance and Policy Committee into one single committee. This is our first meeting, so we're going to get the meeting started at 6:36 p.m. So the first thing we typically do with these committee meetings is we select the committee chair. That said, any volunteers? Tracy?
I suggest that we have you, Ashley, as the committee chair this year.
Okay, I think Terry had his hand up too.
I didn't, but I second, or maybe I did. Sorry. I second it in any event.
Okay. With that said, it sounds like I'm unanimously appointed committee chair, so so be it. Not a problem. So we'll do that. The next agenda item is recording secretary. Do we have any volunteers for recording secretary?
I nominate Tracy.
I'll accept if you're okay with that, Ashley.
I'm fine with that. Tracy it is. Okay. The next piece of business is the committee charge. So I know last year when we met, we had discussed and we had agreed that we would just use the previous year's committee charge. This year, obviously, we're consolidating both governance and policy into a single committee. So I'm wondering what we need to do there. We can probably use last year's committee charge as a baseline and then do some modifications. Thoughts?
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Any thoughts on what specific verbiage we want to add, or should we just circulate the committee charge from last year and then potentially at our next meeting come back with the recommendation as to what the charge should be?
Well, I'm wondering if we just kind of look at both committee charges and see if there's anything we want to question or table down. And then, I mean, we should have to, I don't know, I don't have them in front of me. I don't know if they're on the website. Maybe we should look at how many they are and decide if we don't want to keep all of them. So it's just going to be assignment for like the next meeting. Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, I think that's the best case scenario, right? The point of today's meeting was just to get a meeting on the books and start the process, right? Because we haven't met in a long time. So it's perfectly fine, I think, in my mind, that we just agree on what we want the format to be, and then we can do some homework. And then for our next meeting, when we determine those dates, we can come back and have a more in-depth conversation. I think that makes the most sense at this point. Okay, so it sounds like that's what we'll do. Make a note of that real quick. So Tracy, just for this meeting, since I already have the doc up on screen, I'll just take the quick notes.
Okay, can you share that with me so that
Yep.
I can, okay, thank you. Should I do it right? See the charges for these committees.
Okay. The next point on the agenda is review our last governance committee meeting minutes. Let me pull that up. It was a really long time ago, so I think it makes sense. Some of this stuff I think will no longer be as relevant as our last time we spoke about it, but I think it makes sense to at least put us into a frame of mind of things that were going on, general conversation topics, etc. I think my sharing is paused, so let me quickly fix that. Let's see here. And let's see here. All right, let me share this out. Share screen. Go share. Okay, so can you guys see my screen?
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, so at our last meeting, the last meeting I have on record was December 9th, 2019. This was pre-COVID, obviously, and the notes are here. Essentially, the chair of the committee was Trustee Terry Williams. Recording secretary was myself. The charge at that time was the same as what we did the previous year. This meeting, I believe only Mr. Williams and myself were able to attend, and we had dates set out as well as meeting location. In terms of minutes, we were talking about at this point in time last year, the draft of the deadline dates and milestones for the committee. We were also talking about making a presentation at the December 3rd work session, but that was subsequently canceled. That was talking along the lines of the next point, which is 3A, public comment at board meetings, work sessions, and special emergency meetings. At that time, we were talking about how could we make our meetings most efficient and most effective while still balancing the need for there to be public comment. And we were throwing around some ideas about timings, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, that doesn't matter at this very moment. And we've actually just taken an action very recently on virtual meetings, and we've established, as per the board, we all voted and we agreed on what that public comment is, and we've resumed public comment. So that's obviously an item that's not as prevalent anymore, but that's more or less some of the things we were talking about. We were also talking about developing a policy on handling anonymous reports to ensure that they could be followed up on, as well as governance policies that needed to be reviewed. And we had divvied up how we would go about reviewing those policies and coming up with the plan to address them at the January 6th meeting. We also had come up with an idea that there could be potentially a suggestion box created in the schools where we could have, basically anyone could put in a suggestion moving forward, and we could review that and follow up on that. And then we ended that meeting at 8:15 p.m. So that's what we had talked about the last time we got together. Any questions? Does anybody remember this being different from the minutes I have here?
Did we have, well, I wasn't there, so I don't remember anything, but I feel like we had a meeting, maybe it was before this one, where I was on the phone. I thought that meeting was the last meeting.
That might have been the November
Okay.
4th meeting that I think
Okay.
you were on the phone.
Yes.
And I think this was the meeting after that.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure. All right, so we'll go ahead, and if no one has any comments on these meeting minutes, we can, I guess we have to mark them as adopted in some shape or form, right? Go ahead, Terry.
No, excuse me. I was going to say my recollection, those are accurate from my recollection.
Okay, perfect. So that said, do we need to adopt these or is it just sufficient for us to just read them at the next board meeting?
I think we can just adopt them. I
it's-
mean,
yeah.
we can read them or adopt them. Maybe we should be formal and adopt them and then read them at the next meeting.
Okay, fair enough. So let me take a note of that real quick. And that's what we will do. I'm still looking at the wrong document. Okay. Go, let me share this. Okay, so this was reviewed. Okay. All right. Next item on our agenda is set the remaining meeting dates. All right. Let's take a look at the calendar.
Let me
So
get my calendar. Hold on.
Yeah, so what we did last year, I think we did one per month. And we tried to do more or less the same time frame every month. My phone calendar here, to my calendars.
So it's October now. Can you hear me, Ashley?
Yes.
Oh, okay. How soon do we want to reconvene for our first meeting?
Well, I mean, if we follow the same plan, which is towards the end of the month, I hesitate doing the 24th. Logically, one would say, okay, let's do the 24th. It's about the same time, but that also happens to be the week of Thanksgiving, and I don't think that's the wisest decision. On the 17th, we have a board meeting. On the 3rd, we have a board meeting. So that leaves us with either, if we want to stick to a Tuesday, that would be the 10th, or we could change the day of the week. I'm not, locked into any particular dates. So I'm flexible. For me, it's really the time of day. It has to be more like what we're doing now, 6:30 p.m. I don't know about Terry or Dr. Chase's availability. What makes sense?
I'm fine doing the opposite Tuesdays. I don't know about Terry or Dr. Chase.
Opposite Tuesdays work for me.
Okay. Dr. Chase?
Right now, I have to, my schedule isn't definitive. So whatever date you pick, I'll be in touch with you about my availability as we get closer to the date.
Okay, so here's what I'll do to make the most sense. What I'll do is let me put together, based on the fact that we're all kind of saying opposite Tuesdays, let me put together, tentative plans, dates, and I can circulate them via email to everyone on this call. And then we can chime in once we've had a chance to check all our calendars and come to some agreement. Since we're meeting today, if we don't get a meeting in November, I think that won't be the end of the world, but I think we should definitely get one in starting December moving forward. But we'll try to shoot for something in November at least. Again, my concern with November really being the 24th, I think is probably not the best time to put a meeting in. But that's
Do you think November's 10th is too soon, Ashley?
well, I'm just thinking, yeah, the 10th, I mean, if I show you guys what else is on the calendar, I mean, on the agenda, which is the review of the new board member handbook draft. I'll resend that via email, but that's a big document.
Yeah.
And I know that we all have, we all have jobs, full-time jobs, so it's hard to make time to get through that. So I wanted to at least put something preliminary on when we could do that.
Can I make a suggestion that we kind of try to tackle that in our January meeting? Because we don't have any new board members coming in the next 2 months. So it's not like a urgency. And it is a large document that would give us a couple of weeks to look at it over the holidays, any breaks. And I have an idea for kind of at least a new, more, what I think would be a little bit more urgent thing that we should maybe look at policy wise with regard to kind of online learning.
Okay, so just hold there real quick, Tracy. So before you move on to that, Terry, are you good with setting our January meeting date, whatever that ends up being, as our deadline to do the review of the handbook?
That works for me.
Okay, so let me just make a note of that real quick. So January meeting deadline for our review and comments. Okay. Great. So set remaining meeting dates. So Ashley to propose alternating Tuesdays, dates, times, via email to committee, and then we'll get confirmation from everyone what works. Okay. All right. So Tracy, perfect. You gave us a perfect segue into number 7. Any other business? So go ahead, Tracy. What were you going to suggest?
So I was wondering if as a group, we can come up with some suggestions for possibly not really a new policy, but maybe policy addendum, kind of how we did with our public comments, to have a virtual piece of the policy. And what I'm thinking of is kind of a virtual piece to learning and education. And with regard to expectations and behaviors of students, staff, and actually Dr. Chase brought this up in a leadership meeting we had several months ago, that there's some general, of course, do's and don'ts, right, when you're online and when you're learning, but also, and we would definitely need to get feedback from Dr. Chase and her staff with regard to anything that maybe has happened or maybe we've heard about in other districts that have happened, and we just want to set policy before anything happens, just on expectations of behavior. As well as with parents, being that we all are learning virtually, either when you're off cohort or virtually full-time, you're in people's homes. So we don't want parents interceding in the education process during those hours of 9 to 4 or 8 to 3, whatever time your particular child has her school hours, maybe having, very clear outline on how parents can get in contact with the teacher. We don't want, interruptions in the class. We want to make sure everyone's dressed appropriately, using their Chromebook in appropriate rooms, not really opening class in the bathroom, those type of things.
It's like a best practices kind of
best
thing.
practices and expectations. I know we have that for behavior in general, but maybe we need to have like a paragraph or two about virtual. I don't know what Dr. Chase or you or Ashley or Terry may think, but that's kind of what I was thinking, if we could kind of make an addendum somewhere.
Okay. Dr. Chase, do you want to comment?
Is that the function of the governance committee?
I think Tracy's bringing it up because it's now the governance and policy committee. So I think she's thinking of it from a policy perspective.
Okay. I suggest bringing it to the full board to see if that's something that the full board would like to tackle, because I know we had some conversations on policy recommendations at one point, and I remember giving the board a list of recommendations, but I gave it to the full board. I don't know if that's something that this group wants to tackle and bring back to the full board. I'll leave that up to you all.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chase. Terry, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not really clear on what Tracy is asking personally. Part of it was very wide ranging. Certainly anything that relates to the board and its management of itself, certainly I'm open to. I get the policy part, but I should say, given our policy role, I understand I understand the expanded mandate, but it just wasn't clear what it is, an addendum for what, for behaviors and stuff, wasn't clear to me. I would suggest, Tracy, perhaps if it's your idea, you should write it out and probably circulate it ahead of the next meeting so we could get a better sense. I don't think it's an efficient use of time to kind of hash it out here, especially since it's your idea. But quite frankly, I just don't quite get what you're aiming at.
Well, I mean, one of the things we can do, and I got lost for a minute because I was here looking in our current policies. One of the things we can do, and listen, it's just an idea. You don't have to want it. We don't have to do it or not. But being that we were, and we even talked last year in I forgot which committee it was, about the possibility of looking at policies that need to be created. Dr. Chase said, the administration submitted several ideas as well. And I think that there's nothing wrong with discussing it. It's simply a budding idea. I could write up everything I just said, which I don't think that's necessary. But if we look at, I guess it would be under students.
The Zoom
I'm sorry?
probably did that for us already.
I didn't hear you.
I said the Zoom transcription will probably do the write-up for you.
It probably would. Yeah, it probably would. But if we look under the student section in our policy, we have a student dress code, for example. Do we want to add an example of what I'm talking about would be to add a paragraph about dress code while virtual. Maybe it needs to be a sentence. Maybe it needs to say the dress code needs to be the same when virtual or not, or it could be a paragraph that when virtual, you must be clothed, must not be in inappropriate place. I'm just wondering if there's a way that from the board level, and all of our policies are board level, administrative, and legal, in one, every arm looks at it and makes amendments and makes adjustments and makes suggestions. So from the board level, I'm just thinking that we probably should have a policy to make sure that our students are protected, our families are protected, our staff is protected, and everybody understands the expectations that our school district is setting. That's really it. Anything else, of course, the administration will have the most input, because the administration and the teachers and the staff are the ones that deal with the kids on virtual. We don't as the board. And of course, legally, the lawyers would have to approve anything that the board or the full board comes up with. And I am in no way mean for any of this to be just us. Of course, it has to go to the full board. That's not at all what I was saying, but I think that this place in a smaller setting could be where maybe the ideas sprouted. If we look at our actual existing policies and come up with, what could be an issue or what maybe is an issue. I don't know if our administration wants to look at some of the things, and I'm sure there are from other districts, things that have been an issue and what it could fall under. Student privacy. Do we need to have a paragraph here with student privacy, given that we're all virtual, we're all looking into each other's homes? Do we need to have a privacy statement about that? Do we need to say that, no one should be recording other students or teachers or, any of that? Where do we need to put that? That's all I'm saying.
Got it. Okay. So I think, Tracy, it probably makes the most sense. Maybe when the Zoom recording is done and the transcription is available, we can probably take some of that feedback there. But I think it would make a lot of sense if you put some of that together in an email, send that out to the board, and then maybe we have that to the committee's point as part of the discussion, maybe under the new business section in our next meeting. And then let's see, I agree with both Trustee Williams and Dr. Chase. Let's bring it up to the full board. Let's see if there is a recommendation to the committee to look into that. Just because, thinking this through, what I don't want is I'm of the opinion I wouldn't want us to go through and do all this diligence, and then it finds out we bring it to the board, and the board says, yeah, we weren't looking for that, and basically it was a wasted effort. So I think from
Okay.
an efficiency perspective, maybe that's the best approach.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll make a note here. That actually brings me to something that I want to go back to something Dr. Chase mentioned earlier. Dr. Chase, you had mentioned that in the past you had circulated some ideas as to modifications we potentially would want to do. Do you think it would make sense to recirculate that now in our current world that we live in, and see if there's any appetite for that as well as part of this conversation?
I believe I put it in a packet. I don't remember if I put it in a packet or was it one of the board leadership conversations. I could have someone go back to the packets and take a look at it and see if I can find it.
Okay.
I'll look.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Anything else we should chat about while we're here in terms of any other business for Governance and Policy Committee? All right, Tracy, looks like you're good. Terry, anything?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
I
Tracy,
came up. Sorry, I was a little delayed. Do we want to look at, because I know we had a governance training on executive session recently, and we've had retreats in the past. Do we want to look at, talking to the full board about whether or not we as a governance committee should organize retreats or should help to schedule them? I mean, do you guys think that would be a good use of the governance committee to find retreats or information ideas and ways that we could help each other to be a better, more efficient board?
Yeah, I recall we did talk about that in the past. Trying to remember what we said. I think it was something along the lines that in the distant past, the governance committee was, I think, the committee that was putting together retreat ideas and dates, etc. And then somewhere along the lines, I believe we changed that practice and we went to a full board, concept. I think maybe Mr. Williams may have some more information on that.
So the thinking was that not that the governance committee would put together the retreat, the governance committee would come up with some agenda ideas that would be recommended to the full board for them to adopt. And the thinking, the logic behind that was to keep the retreat from becoming, for a couple of reasons. We wanted to obviously do something that a majority of the board felt was valuable. Number two, the way the retreat was falling, it would fall right after somebody was elected president. And if the president was solely responsible for it, depending on who the president was, whatever was whatever issues had been discussed previously could fall by the wayside, basically. So that was the thinking. It was always a recommended thing, a list of recommendations from the governance committee never that the governance committee would do the agenda. It would just make recommendations on the agenda for the retreat.
Got it. Thank you for expanding on that. Terry, do you have any thoughts on what Tracy just proposed, that we go back to that model, or?
I don't have any thoughts on it.
Okay. Tracy, to answer your question, well, before we go there, Dr. Chase, do you have any input on this?
In terms of the board retreat, I do not at this time.
Okay, thank you. My thought process is, I know that regardless of who the president is, that they're always juggling a lot of different things, from the gamut, the entire gamut of what's going on with the board, as well as most of the board on some level does have other commitments as well that they have to juggle. That said, I think it's a good idea. I would suggest that we bring it up at our next board meeting, and suggest that if the board would like, that we as the governance committee could basically adopt a similar method to what we used to do, and just come up with potential topics, ideas as to what could be discussed during the board retreats, and help maybe streamline that a little bit. That way, there's less to be done at the actual meeting. So I think that's a great idea. Go ahead, Tracy.
Do we want to, so I was gonna send an email to the board on Ivy asking to just prepare for me to bring this up at new business as far as the virtual addendums or policies or adding policies. I don't even know how to word it, but do you as the chairman of this committee then want to say that there's is this under new business? Do you want to bring it up under committee reports and just talk about these 2 items of virtual learning, as well as the committee coming up with topics for a retreat, and then get the conversation going that way? How would you like for us to discuss it with the board in our meeting?
Sure. So my thought, excuse me, my thought is that we present the meeting minutes as they are during the committee meeting portion, and then we bring this up all as new business. It looks like Mr. Williams has his hand up. Go ahead.
I'm waiting for you. I put my hand up to speak when you're done, so finish and then I will make my point.
Okay. Yeah, so my suggestion is that we present the committee minutes during the committee section, and then that I think that any other business stuff that we're talking about now should come up as part of new business. That way we don't deviate too far. We can get the committee meeting minutes addressed, and then that way, whatever discussion happens, and we don't have to go back and forth and confuse the process. That's my suggestion.
Sounds good.
I agree with presenting the minutes, certainly, of what we discussed, but per the specific recommendations are, I think the whole idea of the recommendation is for us to, if we recommend something, then it comes up as a recommendation for the board. Certainly, it seems that we have a majority of us kind of agree with the idea of the governance committee participating in making recommendations for the retreat. Again, I know I made a suggestion, per your suggestion, Tracy, I made a comment about it, and Ashley also made a comment about it. And the gist of it is, it probably needed to be more thought out before we recommend something to the board. Certainly, we should mention that we had a discussion about it, but recommending that we do something when we have nothing is, probably not a good use of the board's time.
I'm not really sure why we're stifling one another. I mean, I think that as board members, we really want to kind of improve things around here. So I think it's important that we come up with ideas, no matter how high level they are, no matter how not thought out, whatever you want to label it as they are. And if, I have this idea, or you, or whoever it is, I don't care who it is, I think it's a good idea. I think that we do need to protect our children, we need to protect our staff. And we already have, as I'm looking at our policies now, we already have framework and guidelines for expectations and behaviors. And I think it's just like with our board meetings, I think it's fruitful for us to also, and safe and smart for us to have guidelines for virtual learning. So wherever it comes up, whether it's in our meeting, I thought our little committee meetings were to help save time with the board. And, if we're not trying to make our board meetings super ridiculously long, these are probably the places in my mind. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. That's fine. But in my mind, these are the places to kind of hash out and tear apart ideas to present them to the board, no matter how high level they are. All final concrete policies start with a high level idea. So hopefully you guys will all think about the idea a little more so that we can have a fruitful and succinct conversation with the full board, because I don't want this to take up like 2 hours or an hour of our board meeting, because we usually have pretty packed agendas. I'm just hoping that the idea, as large as it may be, maybe it wants to start in administration with the staff. Maybe staff have, better succinct ideas on how it could be. Maybe we could, as a committee, look apart and look at the current policies that exist, and then kind of highlight where we think a virtual addendum could go, and then suggest that. I don't know, and I don't care, as long as we try to create something that is helpful.
Yeah, so I think we're all saying the same thing. We're just saying it a little bit differently. So what I think we should do is, I got Mr. Williams' point. I got your point, Ms. Maris. I think we're all saying that we want to potentially look at a virtual policy recommendation, changes there, but that we want the board to opine, including Dr. Chase's comments, right? She also mentioned that we would want the board to opine if this is a fruitful effort or not, if the board's willing to take that on, right? So I think that's point A. And then point B is on the concept of whether the governance committee takes up providing recommendations to the board for retreat topics, ideas, suggestions. I think maybe I misphrased that. I don't think necessarily recommendation was the right word there. I think maybe it's more of, let's raise it, and I'm willing to raise that during our next meeting. And for the same concept, the same idea, basically inquiring to the board, does the board want the governance committee to take that on to come up with ideas for the, for board retreat and those kinds of suggestions? And if the board says they'd like the governance committee to do so, then I think at that point we say, okay, we'll take it back to the committee level, and then we have that conversation here and we figure out what makes the most sense. And if the board opines and says, no, we'd like to keep it as essentially a committee of the whole board, as it is already, where that conversation comes up during our meetings, usually during new business, we talk about that kind of stuff. Then we'll just follow that model. So I think that's what we're all saying, just in a different way.
So we're going to bring it up. So we're going to share our minutes and then wait, and then bring it up at new business, both topics.
Yep.
Okay.
So new business will bring up both items separately. The first one will be the policy recommendation idea, Tracy, and then if you have time, if you can circulate that via email ahead of that meeting, so that they're aware that's coming up. And then what I will do, for full transparency, is I will also circulate the idea, the suggestion that I will bring up during new business for potentially going back to a model of the governance committee coming up with ideas, topics for board retreats. And then we'll have the conversation, I think, at our next meeting, as long as there's time on the agenda. If not, then it'll be the next meeting after that, which is fine. But I think everyone's on the same page, and I think we're all thinking the right thing, which is, let's not get too far deep into any of these conversations without getting the board's input to make sure that it's a fruitful effort. Does anybody want to make any further comments?
I have my hand up, sorry. So
Okay.
listen, I'm sorry that if Tracy took some of what I said personally, I will say this. You proposed two ideas, Tracy. You proposed you rehashed my idea about the governance committee working on the agenda, but I don't want to nitpick. It was a good idea, and I supported it. The second idea, it just wasn't fully formed enough. Look, you're free to bring that up in new business under your own name, but you asked should this committee do that, and I don't know what you're talking about, quite frankly. You gave a whole bunch of ideas. I'm sure within those ideas is something there. It's just not fully formed, and look, like I said, you're a trustee. You have a right to bring up stuff to the board at any time. You just, in my opinion, haven't made it clear what you're trying to do with this whole digital thing. If you guys want to bring it up as part of what we discussed or as a recommendation, by all means, this is a free exchange of ideas, and you gave two ideas, one of which I agreed with, the other that I'm just not clear on. So I don't know if you should feel. I'm not telling you how you should feel, but you shouldn't take it personally, is what I'm saying. And even after all you've said, I still don't know. Excuse me. Let's keep it polite here, because you spoke a long time about your second idea. So let's keep it polite. So look, do what you feel is right. I'm just saying that as a committee, I don't feel comfortable recommending something because I don't know what it is you're talking about. I know what you were talking about with regard to the retreat. That was clear. The other thing wasn't clear. It's nothing wrong with not having clarity yet. As Ashley agreed, and I said it first, perhaps you don't have to do this. Just go back and the practice of putting something on paper sometimes gives clarity to stuff. And the idea lacked clarity.
What did I do? Oh, I hit something.
Okay.
So Ashley, what I was gonna say was that Laser had put something in the chat about comments from the YouTube, but Mr. Williams made a lot of statements. I didn't take what you said personally, Mr. Williams, but you have a way of being really nasty, and I'm not gonna tolerate that. You know that. But I will help you to understand some of where I'm coming from. No, it is not a fully thought out idea because that's not my job. I'm only part of the board. So I'm looking from a policy point of view. Of course, the administration and the teachers and everyone that actually works with the students, the principals pop in and are involved in virtual learning. So they may, of course, have some opinion as well as our legal. So of course, it's not going to be a well thought policy that I'm presenting to you. It's simply an idea. I understand, I have children that are in the district. I have 3 children that learn virtually on 3 different levels. So maybe I'm coming from a point of view of a parent trustee. I don't know. But I can tell you that the students, when they're on a screen, I don't know if you've had the benefit of being in a Google Classroom, but the students, when they're on a screen, they can see all their other classmates. They can see the teacher. Actually, with Google, it's not the same as Zoom. You can, there's only a certain amount, and I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but you could see a certain amount of your classmates. You can see the teacher. Even the students that are hybrid and in school can see the teacher puts it up on the whiteboard, so they can see the students at home, and the students at home can see their classmates in the classroom. I think I pulled up something, I think I pulled up a privacy policy to give an example. I think I just said that when I was explaining myself earlier. For example, when we talk about privacy, I'm wondering, it's a question, do we need to have a blurb, a line, a paragraph that talks about privacy, especially in the social media world, right? So I have kids on different levels. With my first grader, of course, I don't expect to worry that much about his privacy or him videotaping anything. But my high schooler and my middle schooler, sure, kids have social media accounts. They can easily record what is happening in their class. Now, we have an understanding and a policy when we're not virtual, where students are not allowed to record things that happen in the class and then post it, for example, even though they do sometimes, but we have rules and policies that say they're not to do that. So I'm wondering, simple question, not a thought out policy already, but a question, do we need to create policies to talk about these things that are unique to virtual learning, that if I'm in my own home, in my own place where I can video record, and maybe you don't see me because I hold the camera out of the camera view, but I can video record you and then play it. It's a simple question. I don't know why it's confusing, but I'm wondering whether or not we need to have discussion about creating, and the more I talk about it, I don't think it would be an individual policy. I think it would be policies that are weaved into other behavior policies here that we already have existing.
So again, and it's interesting, certainly either the practice of writing something out or the practice of talking something out, you get to get a little bit more information. And in that part of your discussion, that was a little bit clearer because you stuck to one thing. Look, I'm not here to critique your work. It's not my job. All I'm saying is when you first started talking about stuff, and when you first started talking about stuff, it was not clear what you were aiming for. You were a little bit more clear on that one. And certainly we need a policy, perhaps, or an addendum to the policy somewhere about, privacy and the like for the learning environment in which we are in. You said that the first time, and then you transitioned into a bunch of other things that I just could not follow, which is why I suggested that you perhaps wanted to put it in writing so that we could get some insight as to what you were saying. Again, you claim not to take it personally. You called me names and stuff, and I haven't said anything disrespectful to you. I just didn't agree, or I just questioned what the point was that you were making. But I would say it's not. You didn't use the word disrespectful, but I would say this. I'm going to assume you found my comments disrespectful, and I'm disappointed that you would find it that way when all I did was point something out to basically help you to get some clarity. So look, I don't want to waste any more time here on this topic. If a majority of you say, if two of you say we're going to make a recommendation to the board on this thing, have at it. I'm just saying that it wasn't clear initially, and I'm just trying to make sure we don't waste any more time here, and certainly not waste the board's time at a board meeting.
Terry, I find your feedback and critique helpful. Now that I explained it with like a example and it made a little bit more sense, would you agree with that we should kind of present it, or no?
Sorry about that. I'm going to stick by what I said the first time, because while there's a little bit more clarity on this, I still would like to see something in writing. Eventually, we're going to have to put something in writing together. And quite frankly, since you're the one who came up with the idea, you're going to be tasked with it eventually. You could do it now, or you could do it later. It's up to you. I'm just saying that the initial thought that you shared with us, you shared two thoughts with us, one of which I got clearly because it was right to the point. And the other one, it was clear you had some ideas and you were thinking about stuff. But again, when we're in the process of either making, I said two things. I said, either if we're going to make a recommendation, we have to be clear, or if we are, or the other thing I said is we want to avoid, I think, hashing things out hashing things out. Excuse me, folks. We want to avoid hashing things out at the board meeting or certainly here. And again, part of the what would be helpful is to have it written out first. So that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. But no, I would, to answer your question, again, I prefer seeing something in writing first.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. So that said, I think we all agreed that we would like the idea circulated to the board via email, and then we'll bring it up during our new business section during the next board meeting. I did have one clarification question. Technically speaking, the Governance and Policy Committee is a board committee, right? So if I remember correctly, board committees are open for public to view and listen. If we were physically in a building right now, it's open for the public to come and attend. But I don't recall a board committee being one of the committees where there's membership from the public. Is that accurate?
That's what I remember, but I have to look it back up.
That is my recollection.
Okay. All right. So that said, I think we've covered everything I had, at least in my mind, for today. Any other new business to be brought up? Okay.
No, I do want to say it's important to note, and the awesome thing about schools that I've learned in the school district, there's so many different people and different ways in which we communicate, different ways in which our children learn. And even on our board, we have very different people and very different ways in which you communicate. And maybe we should work on being a little bit more tolerant of one another and not really trying to lock people into communicating in one way. So I think it's important. So thank you for letting me explain a little bit further, because maybe I communicate very differently than you. And I think that, setting example as leadership in the school district as a board, we really do need to be more tolerant and accepting of one another, and not so willing to cut one another because maybe we don't fully understand each other right away.
And I will just end by saying one should not take things personal when something does not go one's way. I'm a baseball fan, so if somebody batted 500, which is to say came up twice, got a hit, that would be phenomenal. 50% isn't bad. I liked the first idea, again, because it kind of sounded like something I did before. But the second idea had good parts in it, but it needs clarification. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all. Has nothing to do with, I forget the word you used, not being tolerant. I'm tolerant. I'm tolerant of your ideas. It just needs, I just don't understand it. You could have been speaking another language. I wouldn't understand it. That's pretty much what it was. In what you were saying, it just wasn't clear.
I'm sorry,
in my opinion.
I don't take
don't take it personally. Don't take it personally.
I was just gonna say,
let's move on. Let's move on, because I see we're not gonna come to any. We're making this personal now. We're making this personal, and I'd rather just move on personally.
I was gonna clarify. I was gonna clarify.
Can we just move on? Can we just move on, Ashley?
I'm sorry.
If you want to have a conversation with me, Tracy, give me a phone call. Let's not talk and waste people are listening now. We're not talking anymore about school stuff. You're talking to me about stuff. And if you want to have a conversation with me, you can call me up. You can call me up.
So
I was going to clarify.
Interject here. I think we're getting to a point where we're going down a rabbit hole we don't need to go down at this moment. So that said, since there's nothing else to be brought up, Dr. Chase, do you have anything you want to bring up for new business?
No.
Okay. So that said, I'd like to thank everyone for their time this evening. Tracy, I will get these minutes over to you.
Okay, thank you.
And then from there, we'll move forward with the plan that we have in place. I will recirculate the new board member handbook draft to the committee members to review. And then that's it. And we'll take it from there. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.